All right, hey everyone, welcome back to SOFcast. This is your host, Matt Parrish, and today we've got a phenomenal episode for you. One of my favorite guests from season 1 of this show, Nick Lavery, returns. Not only is Nick an active duty Green Beret, he's an author, he's a speaker, and he's most definitely a warrior. He's been highly awarded for valor and heroism across his career, including Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, multiple Purple Hearts. And those Purple Hearts have given him the opportunity to overcome many wounds and injuries over the course of his career, including losing one of his legs and becoming the first above-the-knee amputee to return back to combat as a Green Beret. Nick's been able to take all of the resilience and all of the mindset and work ethic that he needed to be able to come back from that injury, and he's been able to take it and export it in the form of a book, in the form of speaking engagements and podcasts across the country to different units, different organizations, different sports teams, and he's got a really impactful and unique perspective on just that day-to-day getting up and getting better each and every day. And so I know you're going to really love this episode of SOFcast. All right, my man, Nick Lavery, the machine. Man, it's great to get a chance to talk to you again. How you doing today, brother?
Dude, any moment I get to spend with you, brother, is a good day for me, man. So I couldn't be happier.
Well, likewise, brother. You know, when General Fenton started talking about bringing SOFcast back, your name was the first one that came to my mind. Like, man, I haven't had a chance to talk to Nick on camera since season 1, episode 3. And, you know, you have such an amazing story, not just to those out in the general public, but even to those within, you know, those of us within the force, you know, first active duty Green Beret to be able to return to combat as an above the knee amputee, all these things that you had to overcome.
Yeah, man.
If somebody's listening to SOFcast right now, they haven't heard your story, don't know your name yet, can you give us a quick snapshot into some of the injuries you sustained and some of the things you had to overcome to get to the point you're at now?
Yeah, you know, the kind of the wave tops, Matt, we can dig into whatever details you want. On my third trip into Afghanistan, I was wounded 3 times. The last of that being the most significant insider attack, PKM initiated complex ambush from inside the wire, 12 American casualties, 3 killed, myself another 8. Varying degrees of wounded, and most of the damage to me was to my right leg, which basically just, you know, vaporized it. You know, PKM from 30 feet against human flesh is pretty catastrophic. And that was the initiation of a pre-planned ambush. So there were about 25, 30 fighters around us that just kind of all began to get in on the action, you know. So obviously went through quite a bit of a roller coaster ride in the beginning. You know, I should have died, man, at least 4 or 5, you know, different times. And there was some additional complications that happened during the initial recovery that just only made things more challenging for us all. Eventually made it to Walter Reed. I would spend a year there. I ended up having about 40 surgeries on my right leg as they were battling the infection. They were just incrementally amputating it, you know, piece by piece by piece, usually 3, sometimes 4 times a week. I'd be in surgery and just gradually watching my right leg just disappear over the course of 6-8 weeks, you know, and get that stabilized. And then just kind of begins the somewhat typical recovery journey, working with a physical therapist, occupational therapist, like all of the amazing resources at Walter Reed, get myself upright, working with a prosthetist, get back on 2 feet, eventually get back to third group was my unit at the time at a brag, and was offered the full retirement. And I knew, man, from the very beginning that I was going to stay in the game. And that was my mission. That was my ambition. That was the vision that got me through a lot of really hard times, was getting back to a lifestyle that I love and feel an enormous sense of purpose and privilege to get to do. So I wanted nothing to do with that. And, you know, after a little bit of time and get my med board wrapped up, my leadership over at third group with some oversight from, you know, first SFC and USSOCOM, they gave me the chance to prove my ability to get back to the team, and really threw the kitchen sink at me, and rightfully so. And eventually, you know, passed all those requirements, got back to the team, went back to the same ODA I was on when I was wounded. And it was like 7 weeks later, we were back in Afghanistan, just, you know, back to business.
Yeah, incredible story, brother. One of the reasons I asked that question sort of open-ended is I don't know how to sum up your story as succinctly and as well as you do, because, I mentioned earlier, season 1, episode 3, we discuss your story, and those kind of 2 years of your life right there are incredible, right? Like what you just heard as a listener is definitely the cliff notes of essentially like War and Peace, the level of detail that you can get into as each and every bit of those parts of Nick's story are just phenomenal. And it's incredible. A lot of times we talk about resilience and we hear wounded and injured and ill guys come back. And a lot of times just getting back to the point of being alive and being able to function is an inspiration for all of us. You took it way past that, right? You got back not only to being able to move around, but now being able to go back onto a team as an active Green Beret, going to dive school, all of these things, deploying again and continuing to lead. It's a phenomenal story of your resilience and your strength and your ability to overcome. But now you have this completely different platform, this continued movement that you've made, and this incredible inspirational story that you have. Your continued push on this has given you a crazy different platform, right? It's got to be a little bit surreal coming from kind of the shadows of the team room, now all of a sudden being like on the sidelines with pro and college sports teams and all these things. Talk me through a little bit of that journey since the last time we talked, of now writing a book. And, we'll talk about Nick's book, Objective Secure, here in a little while, but writing a book, being on these podcasts, being on the professional speaking circuit, going and talking to these different, sports teams and all that. It's got to be a little bit surreal, man.
Yeah, man. It's a surreal, humbling, and still at times challenging, in the sense that there's almost this like cognitive dissonance that I still struggle with, today. And, you kind of mentioned the term like the shadows of the team room, and that's an accurate way to put it. And, we kind of live by this mantra of being quiet professionals, and it's about the work that we do, and the results that we create are largely by product of another entity or organization that's kind of at the front of that. And that's why Green Berets exist. So it took me years to get to the place where I'm at now there's a difference between being a quiet professional and a silent professional. And I think that the longer we go with the amazing people that have done some amazing things in total and complete silence, there's just so much value and lessons learned through blood and through sacrifice and through pain and struggle that will just simply remain with that one entity. It limits the ability for others to learn from it. I still struggle with that, but I can tell you really where there was a moment, the catalyst moment, and it was 3 days before I was about to become a father. And I was sitting at my kitchen table at like 2:00 in the morning, pondering like how my life was going to drastically change. And, most parents could probably relate to when you become a parent, like in an instant, man, like your whole perspective and a lot of things change in that moment, and certainly change, indefinitely moving forward. But there I am, 2:00 in the morning. I think I had, a couple fingers of bourbon in front of me, and I'm just kind of sitting there with my thoughts by myself. And that was really where the term legacy began to change for me. And up until that point, as a team guy, as a man, like legacy for me was almost a very self-centered, selfish, like shallow, egotistical concept to like get behind, where I'm going to do things so people can like glorify me once I'm gone. It just seemed like something I wanted nothing to do with. It was like a negative virtue. But once I was going to become a dad, it was like, well, it's about that dude in this instant. It was about him, like this one new little being. How will I be remembered by him, and how will I impact that young man or that eventual full-grown man after I'm gone? So that's where it started to change for me. And it was kind of along that journey where I kind of realized that being a professional warfighter, being a Green Beret, isn't all that I am. But up until that point, doing what we do wasn't so much what I did, it was who I was. Like my entire identity was wrapped up in that one function. I was put on this planet to do one thing and one thing only, and that was it. And I was able to leverage that philosophy to get me through a lot of really hard times and get back to doing a lifestyle which I love. But becoming a dad, or about to become a dad, that changed for me, where this will forever be a huge part of who I am. but it can't be all that I am. There has to be more to me in my life and what I represent and the things that I do for my family and others outside of wielding an M4 in really difficult, dangerous places. That was the transition point for me. And then, it still takes years and years of kind of evolution to come to grips with what does that actually even mean? Like, I don't know then, but that was the catalyst. And then just over time, continue to, get a vision, play with it, start, making some execution, start doing some tasks and start doing some things. And, it kind of takes off from there.
Yeah, I love it, man. You bring it back to fatherhood, to being a parent, and there's so many parallels, as you learn how to be a leader and as you learn how to be a father. You brought up legacy. It becomes really, how do I teach and mentor and parent my kids to be better than I ever was, right? In a lot of ways, as I continue to mature, I just continue to realize, like, being a parent, being a father has made me a better leader, and being a leader has made me a better father and a better parent, because there's just so many parallels of those situations where you want the best for your kids or for the folks that you're leading, and trying to figure out, how do I pass knowledge on? How do I set the conditions so that they can succeed and be even better than I am? And, you really had that revelation. Servant leader gets thrown out a lot, but that's really a lot of what your revelation was how do I pass on what I know? How do I set the conditions, and how do I prop them up, as opposed to it just being about me? And that's really what you mentioned about legacy there. So let's talk about the book a little bit, right? You have this amazing story. You're starting to mature and rise up in ranks a little bit. You're back on a team. You're doing it. You've overcome. And obviously it's a day-to-day grind to continue to overcome with the injuries that you sustained. But, a lot of people in that situation, they might write a book just about their individual story, just about, like, hey, this is me and what happened, and here's how I got to back to where I am now. Some people, having the skills that you have, might write a book just about, sort of the self-help, the leadership, the, hey, here's the mindset that you can have. I think you did a really incredible job of merging those and using your own experiences and writing about some of the things that happened to you and the things that form those skills, and then being able to pass it off and say, hey, you don't have to have sustained the same injuries that I did, but here's the mindset of what helped me get through it. Here's the leadership. Here's basically the con-op of how you can decide to make yourself better each and every day. Talk to me a little bit about your mindset going into writing the book and what your experience was there.
So the initial kind of outline for Objective Secure started years and years and years ago, probably sometime around 2015, 2016, when I got back from my first deployment as a one-legged guy, which was in 2015. And then really it was a lot of great senior leaders. General Tovo was one of them, was the USSOCOM commander. And I was being asked to go kind of represent our strength and conditioning program and our human performance and wellness and Thor and like some of these things in front of these different audiences that I wanted nothing to do with. Like, I just wanted to be a team guy, and I didn't want to be treated any different. I learned very quickly that when a 3-star general asks you to do something, he really isn't asking you of anything. Like, you're going to do it and you're going to do it well. So begrudgingly, I was doing kind of these in-person engagements, and I started to see some of the value that was happening around the people. So then I kind of slowly started to get out into social media a little bit, and I wasn't sure like how to do it, what's right, what's appropriate. Like, I don't really know, just kind of letting my values kind of guide me on what I was putting out. And then just, it was like an explosion of questions and interest, and people are asking a lot of the same question, like, how did you do this, or how do you do this? Or maybe even a more important question would be why? Like, why are you going through all this stuff? So I'm answering like hundreds and then thousands of people like individually, and it was just incredibly inefficient. So I'm like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna actually lay out the answer to this how question, give it some thought, mostly just for efficiency for me. So I was just a better use of my time rather than answering people individually. I could just copy, paste, send, and be done with it. And also I felt like I'd give people a better product. So I did that. I spent about a week or two. I just kind of put together this like 7 or 8 like phased approach to what I did. And I used it that way for years. And that's where it was. That was the intent. It worked. No problem. Fast forward to 2020. Okay. I had been doing that practice for a few years. I'm in Key West. I'm in dive school. I'm getting my ass kicked day in, day out, as with what happens when you go through CDQC. And I've got maybe a week or so left. And one of my good buddies, we played football together in college. He calls me out of the blue. Normally, the unprompted phone call from my boy Eric is like, okay, something like, there's a problem. So I answer the phone. I'm like, what's up, man? How you doing? I'm like, horrible. I'm getting my ass kicked down here. What do you want? What do you need? What's going on? He's like, hey, dude, I'll cut right to the point. I think you need to write a book. And I hung up the phone. I'm like, click. Like, I am not in a place that I can even entertain something this ridiculous right now. That's it. I end up getting back home. He follows up. We sit down on a call like we're having right now. And he's like, nah, put some thought into this, man. And like, I think that there's something here. And at this point, you know, again, I had been a dad for 4 or so years. That initial vision of there needing to be more about me than a warfighter, I had been putting thoughts and pen to paper and just kind of conceptually playing around with ideas. I had no idea what it was, what it could be, no clue, but I was playing around with some thoughts. And my boy Eric presented to me basically like a pitch, like a sales pitch, like a business opportunity, which is funny coming from a guy I've been friends with for over 20 years. And writing a book was like the first step in that. And I originally wanted nothing to do with it. My thought was, his thought was it would be like an autobiography. Like I want, like, write like the Nick Lavery story. And that has never inspired me to really want to do. But as I gave it some more thought, I was like, you know what, man, like I kind of have this outline that I've been using for the last like 4 or so years. And it seems to be working. It seems to be helping people. And he's like, I think that's the book. So of course it's now June, July timeframe, 2020. We're still like mid-COVID. Everything's locked down. The gyms are closed. The jiu-jitsu fight houses are closed. We're doing like half on, half off, half team room, like trying to figure out how to remain productive during this disaster. So I've got a lot of extra time and energy on my hands that I otherwise would have been spent working or in the gym or training or like whatever. So what am I going to do? Well, it just seemed like the stars have aligned where you've got this opportunity. I don't know what it is. And I just got obsessed with it, Matt. It became like I was jumping out of bed at 2 a.m. and I just had to get to my computer and start writing. And it was almost like I blacked out and didn't know what I was doing with my hands or my body. I was going back into Iraq in December. So I gave myself the window from July to like early November just to see what I could come up with. And again, I was pretty much out of my mind on this thing. And, you know, look up, 4 months later, I'm sitting on like 75,000 words. And it's like, oh man, this is like actually a thing. And then, you start navigating through the process of getting it approved. It has to go up to the Pentagon. They have to review it and scrub it. And again, I don't know what right looks like. I'm talking to colleagues and friends and leaders I respect. Like, am I doing the right thing? Am I violating some code? And I got mixed opinions on that, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like, people have a staunch position on like, no, like, you go do your work and you live in anonymity forever. Like, that's what you sign up for. People believe that, which I can respect entirely. So I'm battling through it even after I had written it, keep moving, start working with an editor and, to get it into an actual book. And then you get that first like proof copy that shows up in your hand. And it's like, holy shit, like, am I really about to do this? And that's when it kind of starts to get real. Man, I tell you, it was all the way up until the moment where I've got my account set up on Amazon. Like, everything is done, printed, approved, ready to go. And my fingers hovering over this like approve, like launch button. And I'm still like trigger shy. Like, dude, I don't know, man. And then it's like, I kind of looked away, hit click, and then put it in God's hands and let's see what happens.
That's awesome, man. You actually answered one of my questions because I was going to ask you, how does that feel, right? Like, I was brought up the same way, right? Like, we're quiet professionals, anonymity. And I'll say, I don't disagree with it, even though you and I are talking on a podcast right now, right? Like, I think there is something correct about, for the vast majority of the things that we do, it shouldn't be self-aggrandizing. And I think that's what, I think that's what you've done really well, right? You're one of the few guys that's out there very publicly that is still universally respected within the team rooms, because you didn't do it in a self-aggrandizing fashion. And that was never your motivation. You were always authentic to it, still are. And it comes through very authentically that, like, hey, this is not like, hey, read my story or listen to me and please clap for me. Like, you've never been about that. It has truly been like, hey, How can I inspire others? How can I pass on this knowledge? How can I take what I've learned through blood, sweat, and tears, pass it along so that others can get value out of it, and so that we can all continue to get better day in and day out? And so I wanted to ask you that question because, man, I know your finger hovering over that button, it must have felt very strange to say, okay, I'm actually going to launch this thing, and I'm actually going to put this out there very publicly, because that is very, very different than, the way our culture is within special forces and within special operations. And so, I can only imagine how you felt kind of putting your life story out there, right? But I really appreciate that you did it, and you did it in the right way. I want to talk about kind of the speaking circuit a little bit later, but I want to get into it a little bit. I want to talk about, one of the things as I go and talk to other organizations and things like that I really enjoy is a lot of times I learn from those interactions quite a bit. Sometimes it's because I've got kind of a lens behind their curtain, and I'm seeing how their operations, whether it's a business or sports team or whatever, sometimes you can see how another organization operates, and you can pick up something that you can bring back. But a lot of times it comes from a question, sometimes in like a formal question and answer, sometimes just behind the scenes as you're walking around, someone will ask you a question that either you're in a different place or it snaps you out of kind of your normal, like, oh yeah, this is a question I get all the time, and it makes you reflect a little bit differently. What's the best question you've received that kind of did that to you, put you into a mindset of, hold on, man, I actually got to reflect on that. And that's a different question than what I normally get asked.
Yeah, and dude, you're dead on. That may be one of the things I enjoy the most is kind of the mutually beneficial element to being this kind of service provider. And you get like, whether it's a single keynote presentation or like a curriculum, and you're like training and doing like workshops, and we do all of the above, you get like a solid package on what the thing is. And you put all the work in, and you've practiced and rehearsed it. You're like, I got this, and you full send, and it's rickety, and you continue to polish and continue to evolve. And then through the engagements themselves, whether it's by virtue of a question that's being asked to you, or just as you're going through it, you're like, oh, well, I didn't really think of that, or well, what about this? And then so it's back to the drawing board, and like that consistent, almost inevitably nonstop evolution is something that I love about this industry, because I'm continuing to learn and grow and make mistakes. And, my philosophies have changed even since I wrote Objective Secure. Like some of those things I look at it now, I'm like, I actually have a different position on some of these things, which I think is a great thing. It's like, that's kind of the point, is to be learning and growing. One of the questions that I get, it's tough to say best, because there's a lot of great ones, but the type of dialogue that has really sparked me several times to kind of sit with my own thoughts and pray a little bit, and then, talk to my family, is as it pertains to that kind of work-life balance. I get that question quite a bit, whether it's people that are in the military. We obviously live a very high demand, high octane, we're gone a lot type lifestyle, or not, that just have an appreciation for having a professional life, having a family, having individual passions. Like, how do you balance it all? And that's a great question. It took me a while to get to where I am now. It'll probably be different in a year or two, but I've really cast away the entire concept or verbiage that is work-life balance. And I've landed on what I refer to as work-life harmony. Because I think when you try to have this concept of balance, like a seesaw that's like level, you're setting yourself up for almost an impossibility. Like, it's rarely, if ever, is it actually going to be balanced. It's because at times you have to invest more in one element or aspect of your life than the others. And that's going to come with some concessions, some costs. So I look at it more of a symphony of efficiency. It's a symphony of focus and productivity. Where am I investing my bandwidth now, and to what degree, knowing that there's going to be an association on the other end of that, multi-pronged, that's going to take some losses. But I have to know that and be willing to accept those, and then have some kind of a game plan on how I'm going to rebuild that back up. So it's this kind of symphony of economy of motion as we're investing ourselves in different things. Any type of question or dialogue as it pertains to my family and my professional lives, I should say, are ones that I love having, because those three people, my wife and my two kids, are at the core of the answers to both of those questions. How do you do what you do, and why do you do what you do? It's those three people. And those of us that have a lot of ambition in life and have these big ass goals, and I want to be a Green Beret, I want to write a book, I want to start a business, I want to play in the NBA. It's like, that's going to take a lot of you, right? It requires a lot. But there's a way to do it. There's a way to do it and also show the love and attention and time and focus and aggression at times and passion towards your family. It's just knowing where you're investing at what time and having that kind of consistently on your horizon and operating within those two realms with some kind of fluidity and harmony.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of good stuff to talk about in there. First off, I love the fact that you look back at part of the book, or some of the parts of the book as you read it, you're like, I don't know if that's still how I feel or how I think. I think that's the difference between somebody who writes a book or creates a speech or something like that, and then that is just like their act for the rest. You see some of these speakers, it's like, if you've seen them once, it's the same you're going to see 10 years from now, versus somebody like you who's ambitious in trying to continue to have a growth mindset day in and day out. And we should be learning, right? Like, you should look back. I always say, like, I look back at myself at, 5 years ago, and I'm like, God, what an idiot, and 5 years from now, I'm going to look back at myself right now, God, right, an idiot. What an idiot, like, that's what we should feel like, right? We should be growing and progressing in all of these things. And so I think that's pretty cool to be able to look back at your book and say, hey, there's a couple things that I've already kind of changed a little bit on. As we talk about some of the other ththings, as we talk about work-life balance, one of the things that I realized is you're never going to have, at least for me, like you said, if you're ambitious and you're trying to do all these things and you're trying to succeed, you're almost never going to be able to have an equal balance on time, just like gross time. If you do the math, if you work 8 to 10 hours a day and you've got to sleep somewhere, should sleep 8 hours. Most of us don't. But, if you start doing the math, it's very hard to have that same amount of equal time. I guess if you don't sleep at all, you probably could, right? But for a lot of us, it's hard to have the exact hour for hour, minute for minute, equal amount of time with family or with other pursuits, as with your hustle, right? Your job, whatever it is that you're pushing towards. For me, what I always realize and what I get convicted about when I start thinking about this is it's a balance in quality. It's a balance in passion, right? My wife and kids shouldn't just get what's left over after I've wrung myself out pushing for hours and hours and hours on this professional pursuit. And then they just kind of get like, oh, well, here's what's left over. I've got to be as equally passionate and engaged and present with them and in my kids' lives, with my wife, all these things, so that that is the balance that I'm looking for, right? When I feel unbalanced, I realize it's because I've pushed so hard that now I'm stressed and I'm short with my family. And that's where I'm starting to get that. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah. It's the, quantity versus quality. And I love this discussion as well. Like, chances are you're not going to have the quantity in our personal lives, because our professional requirements and working and sleeping are going to take up the two major chunks of a 24-hour period. But we do have the option of increasing the quality. And quality doesn't have to be, a trip to Disney World like every weekend. It's being present. It's being focused in the moment. And when you're there, you want to be there. And it's not just you're physically there, you're emotionally there, you're mentally there. You're present in the arena that you get to be in. And the phone is somewhere else. Like, the problems at work, the challenges, the incoming email that you're waiting on, that's like the most important thing ever. Like, that will be there. Like, this matters. And I say this as someone who messes it up quite often. And it's a tough pill to swallow when I get that wrong. I would say that is probably one of the bigger challenges that I still face today as someone with a lot of different professional and personal aspirations, is when I'm with them, I'm with them, and they know that I'm with there. And unless there is a Scud missile heading towards my house right now, I don't care what's going on at work. Like, that'll be there in 3 hours. It'll be there tomorrow. I'll get to that then. These people matter. I'm here now.
Yeah, man. I mean, absolutely. It's tough, right? It's one of those things where it's like, it's the easiest advice to give, the hardest advice to take sometimes when we talk about this balance and being equally as present with the family and all those things. It's one of those things. It's like, it's very easy to give that advice. Very easy for me to forget it. Right. And, one of the reasons is because of the passion. What drives you to be very good at your professional pursuits is you do want to jump out of bed to, like you said, you were consumed when you were writing the book. You're bought in entirely. You're jumping out of bed. And I've done that in a bunch of different times in my career with different projects. It's like, oh man, it's 3 a.m., but I got to get up and my mind's racing on this thing. It's chewing on. I got to get it out so I don't forget it, so that I can continue to kind of iterate on it. And that passion, it's very hard to turn that off or redirect into that same level of passion for your personal pursuits and things like that. And so it is very easy. That's why we talk about it, right? Is because it's like most of the things I talk about on this show. Like I'm reminding myself to do this tonight, tomorrow, next week, all those things. And as we talk about that, for you, it's not just work-life balance. It's sort of work balance, right? Like you still being active duty, having all of these different pursuits, these different businesses, all of these things. Like, how do you prioritize your time even within sort of different phases of your work balance? What's that look like for you?
Yeah, it's it's similar in many ways. And the way that I've come to answer that question, just like work-life harmony, or how do you do all the things? I think the most concise way that I've come to answer it at this point is I really just don't do anything else besides that. And right around now, people start to get almost like a jaded, like angry, like I'm attacking you because you like to go play golf on the weekends, or like whatever the thing is. It's like people get defensive and they go on the counterattack, like against me, as if I'm coming at you from a place of like hate, when in fact it's out of love and respect. It's also just the truth. And there's only 24 hours in a day, like we're talking about. What do you want to do with them? What do you choose to do with them? For me professionally now, I sit in a unique position within the United States military where most of what I do for the military and for the Army and for the regiment is a lot of the similar things that I do outside of the uniform. And it's a lot of leadership, professional development, and resiliency training. And I do a lot with our recruiting commands, internal to special operations, as well as to the masses. That's really where I spend the majority of my time. I do provide some additional support to our training sphere within the group, but very little at this point. Usually I'm out with different units engaging. I'll be out at Bragg next week for like almost 2 full weeks with a bunch of different units out there. So the challenge for me now is really just knowing where I'm going and on what behalf am I going there, and keeping a very clear line of the difference between when I'm operating in a representational capacity versus not. So like I've been on leave now for the last like 2.5 weeks. So actually to the next couple of days, like all this is going away, like uniforms back on with the beret. Yeah, man. So, leave is about to end, and then it's going to be Army look and in uniform. So just knowing where I'm operating in what arena. Usually I'm bouncing off of like TDY to leave to TDY, but we've got such amazing support system of visionaries and leaders that truly believe in doing talent management wherever they possibly can. Now, that's a really difficult thing to do when you've got like millions of service members, but as it pertains to me personally, that's been made all the way up through the chain of command, where they're like, no, like let's operationalize some of the things that Nick has a unique ability to do and put some support behind that. So it's an amazing opportunity, man. I'm with different branches. I was with a bunch of Marines a few weeks ago. I'll be with a bunch of Air Force guys in a couple weeks. I'll be out at Bragg with a bunch of Army guys and some other dudes. So it's really a unique vantage point where I get to see how a lot of these different units and branches are functioning and some of their challenges. And this won't surprise you, but it's a lot of the same themes, man. It's a lot of the same themes. Whether you're in the Coast Guard, you're in the Marine Corps, the Navy, it's like similar challenges, similar gaps, similar priorities, And so I'm able to use what I do internally and wield that externally, as well as the other way around. When I'm providing some kind of instruction to, the Boston Celtics, is I'm learning from a high performing organization on how they do business. I'm extracting that knowledge and that wisdom and those operating systems from them. Because then 2 days later, I'm with the 82nd Airborne and I'm like, hey guys, like check this out. This works. And I'm seeing it firsthand. So it's a cool kind of interwoven interoperability of how internal and external we're able to kind of leverage the same stuff.
I love it, man. Unfortunately, it's a little bit rare sometimes that we do it right there, like that, right, with talent management. Like we take a guy who's got very unique and amazing skills, and let's not make him get out of the military and go do this on his own. Let's let him continue to expand influence and continue to do what he's doing, and also invest back into the force while he's still active duty, right? Let's take him to these other units and have him be able to export some of this rather than having to hire him back in as a consultant to be able to come in and speak for these things. Hey, we got a guy who's in uniform. It's good for the regiment. It's good for special operations as a whole. It's good for the broader military. It's great for recruiting, all those things, and it allows you to be able to do what you're uniquely qualified to do, and for the nation and the military to continue to strengthen through that. I think it's super cool. We talked a little bit earlier about interoperability and taking lessons from one organization or team or other things and bringing it back. You've had an opportunity to get behind the scenes on a lot of these places, like you said, everything from the Celtics to businesses, all these different things. What are some of the lessons that you were able to take from seeing how other organizations operate and be able to bring back to the military?
I'll tell you what's an undeniable theme across organizations that win and win with consistency is to the degree in which they invest in their people. And that certainly comes with constraints and restraints and resources and, budget. And I get all that. Removing some of those challenges off the slate of discussion just for a second to look at it more conceptually, that's an undeniable theme. Whether it's a professional sports team, a Fortune 100 company, worth tens of billions, law enforcement organization, first responders, NCAA, universities, that's a noticeable theme across all of them, is the degree in which they're willing to invest in their people. And that's a very easy slogan to get behind and put in some command philosophy memo or a caption of an Instagram post. That's an easy thing to say. What makes it hard is it's going to come with costs. It's going to affect the bottom line. If you're going to win, there is no such thing as making an investment without costs attached to it. No one's just going to hand me 20 shares of Apple stock. I have to buy those, and I lose on this cash that I could have bought a bunch of Jordans with. I invest that in something with the thought of in 10 years it's worth more. You're doing the same thing with people, but it's going to affect the bottom line. And a lot of leaders get to that crossroads, and they're looking at that hard choice, and it's oof, Matt, you're such a great asset. I don't think I can lose you for a week or two or a month. I don't think I can write the check for this thing that you and I both think may really help you, but it's the third quarter. My supervisor's breathing down my neck to produce results. I got a lot of red blocks on this tracker. I got to turn them to green. It's just not a good time. That's going to happen. So if you're going to get behind that philosophy where you're going to invest in people, know with both eyes open going in that it's going to hurt. And in fact, you're going to make investments at times that don't return any kind of positive dividends. That's going to happen. And when that happens, do you maintain the course, or you just scrap the entire project and you're no, we're not doing this anymore. It's bottom line up front. It's mission only. And that's it. And the people are going to have to take care of themselves. That happens, unfortunately, quite often. The organizations that continue to win are the ones that make that commitment, stand by that commitment, put their money where their mouth is, and even when it doesn't play out to their benefit, they maintain the course. They make some adjustments. Nothing's set in stone, but that concept remains intact, and they just continue to. And you do that enough, you invest in your people enough, they will produce results.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's great stuff. We think of it from the context of soft truth number one. humans are more important than hardware. Hey, our people are our decisive advantage. It's very ingrained into special operations that we invest in our people. And we still have to continue to remind ourselves, because there is a cost to that, right? There is a continual cost, from a POTIF perspective, from a warrior care perspective, from all of the education that we do, all these different things, there's a continued cost. But investing in those people is what makes the mission continue to go, and what defines us and sets us apart. One of the things that complicates it in corporate America is, kind of the tendency of folks to jump after 1 or 2 years to another career or to another job, makes leadership even more hesitant to be able to say, oh, well, if we invest in this person and they leave, like, we may just lose that investment entirely. But you see a lot of organizations that continue to lean into it because they realize either we're going to retain more of those people and less people are going to leave, or they might realize, some of those folks that left might realize the grass is not always greener elsewhere, and that because we invest in our people here, some of those folks may get out and get other experiences and return back into our fold and continue to invest in our organization. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I assume if you could go back to, we talk about the wounds you sustained in combat, especially that third time you were wounded on that trip to Afghanistan that ultimately ended up, costing you a leg, and all these other things, and the crazy blood transfusion mix-up, and all of these just surgeries and catastrophic things that you had to go through. I assume that if I ask, hey, if you could go back and change that if there was the ability to go back and make sure that no one else was killed or injured, that you'd probably do that. Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I assume that would probably be your answer. But I'm curious, if we took all of that away, if nothing else could be changed, but you could go back and not experience that, I'm curious, would you change it? Because obviously there was years of pain and crazy resilience that you had to show, but ultimately it helped forge who you are now and put you on this path to be able to have all of this experiential knowledge and mindset to be able to pass on to others. And so I'm curious, would you go back and change it?
Yeah, I've been asked this question before. And if you do remove the other elements of the dynamic, you remove my teammates from it, and it's just me. And let's say, in theory, let's play the game for a second, I could go back and everything else would have played out the exact same way, except I have both legs. I'm unwounded, okay? And then fast forward from that point. The butterfly effect, is a theoretical concept of, like, if you were to, go into the past and, like, change one thing, the whole space-time continuum, right? Like Marty McFly and Doc Brown, like, he's petrified of the disrupting the space-time continuum, because it could, who knows what happens as that butterfly continues to affect moving into the future. You could change the entire present and, like, ruin everything. Theoretically, that makes sense, right? Like, just think of land nav. Like, if you're traveling over like 10 clicks, if you're off by a half a degree, you take 6 steps forward, there's no difference. But span that out over 10 kilometers and you're in a whole different location. So, like, that makes sense to me. I can get behind that theoretically. To put myself in that position and think about undoing what happened to me, I think about my wife, I think about my kids. And the thought of changing any single moment in the past could potentially pose the risk that I don't have them the way that I have them today, makes that entire theoretical discussion just completely and totally obsolete. It really doesn't have anything to do with how I've been able to leverage my injury, for business or for the greater good. Those things exist for sure. But for me, it's about those 3 people, and they're the greatest part of my life. So the short answer is I would not change a thing in the past, because, again, theoretically, it poses a risk that I don't have them the way I have them today, and that's unacceptable.
Yeah, man. Obviously, I love that answer as a family guy myself. Like, I completely understand. I think totally get it. As we talked earlier about you being able to go out to some of these different units, some of them within special operations, some of them outside of special operations. One of the ones recently that I saw that you had a chance to do was go out and talk to some guys that were coming through 18 X-ray program, right? Recruits coming straight off the street, going through the 18 X-ray program, trying to become Green Berets, right? And I know you and I were both 18 X-rays back in the day, got a chance to join, go through basic airborne preparation course, go to selection, all those things. And, I remember during that time frame as just like a young 18 X-ray, private first class or whatever, I think I saw 2 or 3 Green Berets at all before we actually got into some of those prep courses at Bragg and things like that. And every time I did, it was like, the Lord had walked down off of the mountain, and it was just like, holy cow, because you don't actually get to interact with those guys a lot other than your cadre. So someone coming and talking to you and actually like trying to impart knowledge and things like that is just like a game changer, right? So I can't imagine what I would have felt like if Nick Lavery had walked into my, SOFC or my 18 X-ray program and started talking to us. I'm just curious, what was that like being able to go back to that as a former 18 X-ray? What was your message to them? What do you try to get across to them as they're, hopefully pushing towards trying to become Green Berets in the future?
Dude, I got to tell you, professionally speaking, get a chance to spend time with that young generation of aspiring Green Berets, specifically, just service members in general. But, for us, we come from this, we've only lived in this world professionally anyway. So get a chance to be around those at OSIT or basic training and those that are already in the X-ray program or have a desire to get into the X-ray program. I've had a chance to do that a few times. I'll be back out at Fort Moore in a few months to kind of do a similar thing again. And it's just as surreal as it gets. Like, I tell them, I'm like, dude, I was you like 10 minutes ago. Like, it feels like I was just almost probably literally right here on this concrete pad as a 24-year-old kid, right? College graduate, a lot of life experience, but like a 24-year-old young person, scared, like nervous, excited, like what's about to happen? Like, I have no idea. I got these like BCGs on and I'm just like running all the time. Like, I was you what feels like 10 minutes ago. It goes by, that fast. And the message I typically like to share, especially with aspiring Green Berets, is know your why. Like, know your reason. Why do you want to become a Green Beret? And in my opinion, and this is maybe a polarizing opinion, some have different ones, which is great, is I don't think that there's a wrong answer to that question. The only thing that is a requirement is that it has to be real. It has to be authentic. If you want to be a Green Beret because you just want to see if you can make it through it, like, I just want to see if I'm tough enough to make it through the Q course. I have no issue with that whatsoever. If that's what it takes to get you through to the end, outstanding. If that is the reason for real, and then you kind of paint this like, I want to serve my country or national defense, like mirage, because you think that that's the right answer or like the more appropriate answer, when you start getting your ass kicked, which is going to happen on a regular basis, that is going to be the thing that you grow to grab onto to get you up and continue moving forward. And when you go to grab it, if it's a total facade, because you've created this like nonsensical lie, it's not going to work. And it's at that point, you will, quit, you'll voluntarily withdraw, you'll fake a knee injury. It happens every single class. So know your reason, have it be authentic, and sink your teeth into it, because that's going to be the thing that gets you through it. I had dudes that I was in selection with that when the cadre asked us that question, they went around like, why do you want to be a Green Beret? One dude literally said, Matt, I'm not kidding, I've been playing a lot of Call of Duty and I want to see what it's like for real. I'm not joking. That was a real answer. And a lot of the cadre didn't like that. They're like, that's, they had some choice words, but they said like, that's not going to get it done. That exact dude right now is a CW3 in 7th group. I still know him, right? Absolute stud, has had an amazing career. He wanted to be a Green Beret because was playing a lot of video games. So I think as long as the reason is authentic and powerful enough to get you through the really hard times, then I think that's a great step in the right direction.
Yeah, I love it. Before you brought that story up, I was going to say, now if the cadre asks, maybe you give them a little different answer, but make sure you know your real authentic why so that you can harness it. But yeah, that's hilarious. I mean, hey, we know the deal, right? It really some people are running away from something. Some people want to see if they can prove something. Some people, it is a very, it's a family tradition. There's all kinds of different whys for why people join the military period, but why people join special operations and want to, kind of test themselves. And as long as you know your why and you can harness it in the dead of night when you're freezing and cold and hurting and all those things, hey, great, rock on, right? I think, and you'll probably agree, now with the internet, with podcasts, with Reddit forums and meme pages and all these different things, candidates for these things and recruits have way more information than you or I or anyone else in history has ever had about every little piece and part of all of these different iterations and training and selection and whatever else. But ultimately, forget about all that. Like, yes, it's nice to know some of that information, but what it's really going to matter is in the middle of the night when every part of your body is screaming, stop, are you going to keep going, right? Are you going to be able to step up and continue to move? And that's what ultimately really is going to set you apart one way or the other.
Yeah, it's true, man. I mean, you mentioned the physical component and like the intellect and the character, and all these things do tie together. It's tough to say like what's the most important element of a human to make it through something that's really that hard. They all play a role. But to your point, man, yeah, like the information is out there. And that's another thing that has, some of us older timers and people that are a little older timer than me. It's like, I never knew any of that stuff, so they shouldn't need to know it. And it's like, I can understand that position. Looking at it holistically and objectively, we also, Matt, you and I, by virtue of the lack of information, had far less options in life. Like when I was a young person, it was either go to college, become a blue collar worker, become a criminal, go to jail. Like that was pretty much it. Or join the military. So like those are your kind of like 5 major categories. Dude, nowadays you've got 12-year-olds that have monetized TikTok and they're making $100,000+ a year. And they know they can do it. So if you look at it a little bit broader in terms of recruiting, who we even have to go after, like the state of the military, national defense, it's like maybe there's a place to enable some of these young people to not only give them the information about what's possible for them, options to choose from, but maybe enable them to make it through a little bit. Again, it's a slippery slope. It's a tough line to walk. I get the positions, but yeah, we didn't have that kind of data that they have now. And I think we have at least an opportunity to leverage that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't really ever thought of it in that context as like, hey, maybe part of the reason it's okay for them to have a little bit more information is we have to dissuade them from some of these other shiny objects and things like that, and maybe getting a little bit of a window into some of this. Now, again, you and I agree, like, we're probably further on the old timer spectrum than some others, but maybe giving them a window into some of this might make it more appealing and appetizing. Like, hey, I want to go test myself against that standard, and I want to go see. Right? I don't think they should have every bit of information on everything in selection and whatever else. But I think giving windows into that when there's so much other noise outside trying to pull some of these young men and women away might make it more appealing to go after. One of the things that's interesting when we talk about resilience, and when I talk to you about resilience, I feel almost like it's like I'm going to Michael Jordan and asking him about how to play basketball, right? Like you're on such a different level than the average person when it comes to the things that you've had to overcome in the resilience you've shown and the work ethic you've shown now, to talking to you at the pinnacle of this journey versus somebody who's sort of at the bottom of the mountain. And so I want to read a passage out of your book, a quote out of your book in your words that kind of sums this up really well. And again, this is your words from Objective Secure. I was not genetically gifted with astonishing talents. I don't come from a family of wealth. I make mistakes constantly. I lose focus. I procrastinate. I waste time. I feel pain. I experience fear. I bleed. I am not cut from a different cloth. I am not from another planet. I am a human, same as you, which means we have the ability to choose. And then skipping down a little bit, we must simply decide, this is what I believe, this is who I'm going to become, and I'm willing to put it all on the line to achieve it. So I wonder how often, I feel like you probably get this fairly often. How often do you get, as you talk to someone, like, okay, yeah, hey, machine Nick Lavery, like, sure, you can do this, but how am I supposed to do this? Do you get that otherworldly kind of look quite often?
Yeah, it's one of the kind of unintended consequences or challenges that presents itself as you start to gain more attention from others. Then certainly with those of us within special operations, we get put on this like pedestal that isn't real. And a lot of us do it to ourselves. It's like, do you want to post the cool guy photo because it's going to get people's attention, and then you can use that attention to like drive a message that you think will help somebody. Like, that's a strategy that I've employed. The downside is when they see the cool guy thing, it's like, oh, you're like a different type of like being, right? So like what you're telling me applies to you because you're a 6'6", 240-pound, like tattooed one-legged cyborg, but like I'm a 45-year-old mailman with like a wife and 5 kids. Like, that doesn't apply to me because I'm not you. And it's like, well, okay, that's not true, but I see where you're coming from. So like, we as like people of influence that have set on a course to like enable and empower and inspire other people have to know that as well. So humanizing myself, which was a huge part of that quote that you wrote, which is why I put it at the end. It's like, you're going to read a lot of like holy shit kind of stuff, but I want to end this by saying, like, the only superpower I have is the same one that we all have, and that is free will. That's it. It's like the ability to make decisions, and those decisions can be really difficult at times, but we all get to have that, especially as American citizens, but this applies to human beings in general. We have the power of free will. That is the superpower. So trying my best to like chip away at this almost nonsensical but understandable facade of this pedestal that a lot of us get put on is important to keep doing that. And like for me, man, it's I don't want to say it's easy, but I've learned from some amazing people over my career the importance of humility, and that is an underlying theme amongst the highest performers I've ever been around ever. And I'm also talking about some of the badasses, elite units that have been through some amazing, unbelievable stuff that I've been alongside of, working with, connected to. Like, you are an absolute savage warrior. Those individuals have weaponized and operationalized humility to like the next degree. And I've learned that over time. Like, this isn't just about being modest because it's like the proper thing to do. It's an offensive tool. And when you decide to like put that into action as part of the way you live, then that's going to start to bear its fruit. That's going to start to show its value. So my continuous effort to be transparent and authentic about what it means to be a special operator, or what it means to like be an author or like run a business. Like, I'm a human being, and we have the same choices that we can make. It's like the ability to choose. And what are you going to do with that free will? It's entirely up to you.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. It's incredible. One of the things, we talk about with special operations is the people, right? And one of the great things about being in special operations is you have such incredible people around you that are better than you at so many different things, faster, stronger, smarter, whatever it is. You usually don't have to go looking for an opportunity to be humbled, right? Like, as you're just digging in and everybody's getting after it every day, you're getting humbled and staying humbled. And I've had the same experience that you mentioned.
Yeah.
The best folks, the guys and gals that are really absolutely leading the way are some of the most humble folks on earth. The folks that are telling you the most about what they do most often are not doing the right things behind closed doors. And really, we are blessed as an organization, as a regiment, as a command across SOCOM to have incredible people who are amazing warriors, amazing professionals, leaders. All these things are incredibly humble about it. And in the same way, man, as we kind of wrap this up, brother, when we talk about, originally why this show was started, why does SOCOM want to have a podcast? Why does it want to have a platform at all these things? One of the main reasons that kept coming up was, hey, we want to be able to shine a little bit of a spotlight on some of the exemplars of our profession, right? Unfortunately, we talk about all the time, like I just mentioned, about having the most incredible people in the world and all these people that are dug in and all these things. But unfortunately, a lot of folks across, sort of the general public, they may hear about special operations, but they don't hear about individual special operators or learn about individual special operators' stories, usually unless it's something bad, right? Either there's a bad news story or there is someone who's out there and sort of self-aggrandizing and kind of, trying to be a look at me kind of person. And so they very rarely get to see who we consider to be really exemplars of our profession and stewards of our profession. And man, whenever your name comes up, man, I always say you are one of them. If we're going to have this show and we're going to put a light on somebody who is just daily dedicated to getting after it and to getting better and to leaving a legacy and exporting all these things, man, it's you. Like I have so much respect for you, brother. It's been amazing to be able to see you on this journey and continue to be inspired by you, man, and just all the respect in the world, man. I want to pass it over to you for sort of some closing thoughts as we wrap it up.
Yeah, bro, man. Likewise, man. One of the things I mentioned earlier about kind of that challenge of writing a book and getting out there, and I had mixed opinions on that. One of the greatest fulfillments I've received since committing to the process is a lot of those same individuals whom I consider brothers and friends that had an adverse opinion about me doing something like that. Fast forward a year or two, have come out and said, hey man, like, you know what? I was wrong, or I'm glad you did what you did. And I like the way that you're doing it. And like, you've impacted me. Like that's a huge win for me. It's a huge means of validation. So coming from a guy like you, man, you and I go back quite a ways, man. It means a lot to me. I appreciate it. What I'd close with is, the world of special operations is, if you took the word special across the entire enterprise and swapped it out with the word different, nothing would change. Like, that's what makes us special. It's just that we do things differently. It's not necessarily better than is a comparative term, right? We're not a better tool. We're not necessarily better at shooting a rifle. Like, I've gotten owned on the range by infantry guys, like with literally that. So like, better than is like, well, better than at what? Like, what are we talking about? Special means different. That's it. Are we elite? Yes, we are elite. We are elite by virtue of how different we are. And my point behind this is that every single person to that point of free will has the option to choose to be different. How different are you willing to be? Specifically, how different are you willing to think? And maybe even more significantly is, how differently are you willing to act? How differently are you willing to behave? That is what makes special operations what it is. It's just that we're different. Series of choices that we make about going about our day-to-day lives in business, in life, in general, in the team room, out of the team room. How different are you willing to be? You're going to have to go against the grain. And this is me talking to mostly like the 18, 19, 20-year-old right now. You're going to have to go against the grain. You're going to have to be seen as a buzzkill or boring or lame, or like, you're going to have to go against the norm, because by definition, different is other than the norm. So ask yourself that question. Like, are you willing to lean in and live life virtuously and with integrity and another level of discipline and work ethic, and build that mental toughness and that physical capability over time? If the answer to that question is yes, then this is the organization for you, should you choose to serve in the military. And if not, you will dominate all those around you, regardless of what you decide to do. If you just take on a fraction of these ethos, you're willing to think different, willing to do different, man, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Man, again, I really appreciate your time today. Really enjoyed talking to you and hearing some more of your perspective. And I can't recommend it enough. Go back and listen to season 1, episode 3. Hear this story. Hear Nick's story of all the things it took to even get to before we even started this episode, right? The years and years that he worked through some of these injuries to be able to get back to the point where he's driving forward. And, give him a follow on social media. He's always putting out good stuff. Again, it's not a clap for me, look at me kind of thing. It's, hey, this is how you can put some of these things into practice. And again, brother, I appreciate everything you're doing out there. I appreciate your time and your friendship, and really appreciate you joining us today on SOFcast. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of SOFcast. No matter where you find our show, do us a favor, go give us a like, a follow, and share it with somebody in your network who might enjoy this episode. Also, please go give us a 5-star review. It really does help other people find the show. If there's someone else that you'd like to hear from or a topic you'd like to hear about, please shoot us an email, SOFcast@SOCOM.mil. And while you're at it, go check us out on social media at USSOCOM, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn, wherever. Follow along with what's going on with U.S. Special Operations Command and with the show. And on behalf of all of us from General Fenton on down at U.S. Special Operations Command, thanks for listening to another episode of SOFcast.